Namaskar. Welcome to the Indian AdGeek episode 31. My name is Vishal Mehra. My guest today is the global client lead at AKQA, a company that sits somewhere between a creative studio, a product house, and a glimpse at what this industry might actually become. Before that, she was the CEO of DDB Berlin. Before that, EVP Client Servicing Director at Energy BBDO. 3 chapters, 3 very different definitions of what it means to do great work for great clients. Please welcome to the Indian AdGeek, Bianca Dordea.
Hi, Vishal. Nice to see you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, pleasure to have you. It's been a while since we've been in touch, so it's finally terrific to have you on the show.
Yeah, you are way fresher than me. You just came back from the vacation, so please take it easy.
I just came back from a vacation and early morning shower right here in New Delhi. I think you're in Sydney. Are you in
Melbourne
Sydney?
right now. Yeah, Melbourne right now.
Melbourne, yeah. So it's
Yeah.
slightly middle part of the day for you. So you look great as well.
Thank
I want to start with your time at DDB Berlin. I know probably the first time that you were managing an entire office, right? Tell me about how was that and what really leadership meant for you in that first year at DDB Berlin.
Yeah. It was actually my second or third time as I was managing an office. It just happened to be in a different culture, which is humbling lesson actually, not only in leadership, but in adapting to the new ways of being and working. And I think the evolution from client services director, as I was before when I stepped into the role in Berlin, it's having to consider not only the, let's say, the client satisfaction and the actual work, but realizing that you're responsible for a complete system that embeds the people around you, creating the right platform for them to function and create great work that then you can actually put forward in front of the clients. You're responsible equally for a culture. So suddenly from a very, I would say, transactional and momentum-based relationship, I realized I'm responsible for a system that was a continuous evolution and progress, and anything that every decision of leadership that I was taking would impact that. Besides that, living in another culture suddenly, like a German culture is notoriously known for being a very direct one, was a really interesting evolution in the way I learned to conduct myself and the business. I think I learned a lot from the people that I was surrounded with, but was also another way of dealing with my daily job, I would say. People were also very skeptical to change as well, and that actually created a little bit of a friction, I would say, and the role became a little bit more complicated than initially I thought, or I was used to back from Romania at that time. So yeah, it was a learning curve. As every job is like a learning curve. Yeah.
Every job and every role has its own learning curves and different things that you must adapt to. I wanna now get into your time after that at AKQA, and you're of course leading right now the relationship with Coca-Cola, right? And you've also been awarded the mandate for Mazda and Apple. Correct me if I'm wrong. So really interesting brands, different industries. But I want to start with something more fundamental. I've always wondered about this, Bianca. You go to a dinner party or you go to a do, and you when you tell somebody that you work at AKQ, what do you say? Do you say you work with a creative agency? Because it's not exactly a creative agency. I don't know if it's a consultancy, it's a design firm. What is it?
Yeah, I love this. I think it's hard to put AKQA in a box, because I feel like what AKQA does very well is building the things that brands and businesses need to coexist in a world today and tomorrow, actually. So, which I don't know if it's like too metaphorical or too etherical the way I express that, but this ambiguity, I think it positions us in a very sweet spot where you could say, like, depending on the business issue, it could be a design issue, a design solve actually, it could be equally a creative thing, but could be a growth modeling exercise where we are trying to find new audiences to actually help a brand gain more, let's say, sales and market share. I think it's in a sweet spot where it functions at the intersections of everything you named and a little bit more, including brand strategy and many other components of the marketing of today and tomorrow. And we're dealing with solving the client's problems, basically. So it very much depends on the business. But I think the confusion comes when we're dealing actually with procurement, let's say, on the other side, which tries to put us in a block, and then the situation becomes a little bit confusing and is more about what we are trying to solve rather than actually the what we manage contextually based on the briefs.
That's interesting. So let's say you're meeting a client for the first time. How do you categorize AKQA? Do you say we are a business problem solver, or what verbiage do you use usually?
Lately, we are working with what we define AKQA as being is the frontier agency. So we're building the solutions of businesses for businesses and brands generally to be successful in tomorrow's competitive landscape.
Frontier agency, I love that.
Yeah, well, we'll do frontier work because as actually that excitement of things that haven't done before, inventing new things or new ways or finding new target audience or doing things differently than the traditional ways of marketing and advertising, right? Therefore, we call it lately frontier agency, frontier work.
Bianca, you have led traditional creative agencies. You're now leading, of course, at AKQA. You look at a language of a traditional creative director. It's rooted in emotion, storytelling, cultural zeitgeist. The language of a production, or rather a product designer, is slightly different. More in user flows. You want to talk about maybe conversion metrics also, when possibly when these two cultures or these two ways of working clash internally. How do you figure that out? How do you ensure that that logic is not killing the magic, and vice versa?
Well, I feel like for about a decade, at least I've been privileged enough to functions in worlds and being surrounded by multi-hyphenate people, where the creative director is actually curious about how the systems work, about the logic, and how the feelings will be actually applied into a system, basically, and vice versa, where the product people our designers are curious about the feeling. So any product has to have at the core a usability that is rooted in feelings and human, right? Like human insights. So yeah, I don't know other ways of working, to be honest. I think I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by people who have this duality in terms of thinking and can bring it all together in the most harmonious way. And it's not one way or another, at least. And that was the situation at DDB before, but AKQA is even more talented, let's say, in selecting this type of people that are actually able to see multidimensional and to think multidimensional. That's why the work is not just a system that is not applicable into a human correct usability. And neither campaign is just a beautiful campaign that has no applicability into a system, right? So the beauty of it is bringing all together. And I think everybody actually functions this way.
Right. The founding mythology of AKQA is deeply intertwined with Nike, right? The Nike Training Club, the Run Club, the Jordan Brand digital ecosystem. Those relationships, are about building product, not so much about advertising. So I want to know from you, how does AKQA think about the difference between being a creative partner and being a product studio, maybe, if I can say that, embedded inside a client? And is that distinction meaningful anymore as far as you are concerned?
I think it's connected to what you asked before. I don't know if there's like a clear distinction anymore. And I think, yeah, what you mentioned with Nike, which is still one of our clients, but I cannot really speak to that. But the times that you're mentioning, and AKQA has been notoriously building its legacy on the relationship that our founder, Ajaz Ahmed, former CEO, has been building with as partnership with this client. Idea of the agency being embedded in the client business, I think it's not new, and it's something desirable at both sides, where you are not just a, let's say, an executor of the briefs, but you are deeply embedded and treated as a partner. So you define together what are the business problems that you need to sort out. And that's the situation. And I feel like these models of co-creating together with the client and coexisting with the clients are more and more, I would say, efficient. We look at what WPP has created around the Coca-Cola company, the OpenX model. We look at other creative teams created around the client that more and more start to be connected and be an extension of the client rather than an agency that services a client and a business. And so I feel like, yeah, the more we don't refer to this as a distinction, and we end up coming together as one, together with our clients, not us as like service providers, the better this will be to sort out the actual and focus on the real business. We're not there to create campaigns, I guess. We're there to, sort out what is not working so we can actually be accounted for the success of our work.
The clients that you're managing, and AKQ as a whole also is taking care of. Uh, uh, do you approach creative problems differently than what other agencies do? I'm curious about that. And I think you can refer to your experience at DDB or BBDO or other places that you've been before. What's the difference in the way that AKQA approaches a, a possible communication problem of a client, as opposed to any other agency you might have worked at in the past?
Yeah, I think what what I feel is different than other places that I experienced at AKQA is exactly this synergy with the client, being truly a partner for them and co-creating actually everything connected to the brand expression, right? So, which is so much connected to the product and everything that we're doing. Being very early embedded and partnering with them in the early stages, we're not there to receive a brief. We are there to get signals together, articulate together the business problem, and then sort it out together. So that's actually the differentiating point. And I know more and more agencies are doing this nowadays because the industry is catching up, and we figure we cannot be an external entity pretending to solve problems for a place which doesn't accept us and that treats us as suppliers, right? So I think this partnership that we have with all of our clients is very, very important. And being as connected as possible, or as connected as the clients allow us, that's actually a successful story. And I think AKQA was one of the promoters of these ways of working, and it understood very fast how is the best to create. Because Nike didn't come, and none of our clients come to us saying, I need a campaign. We worked in like, what is the problem that we need to solve?
Right. So yeah, let's stay on that for a second more. And I'm also thinking about a comment that you made about procurement in the beginning of our chat, because let's say when you're pitching a complex digital product or an ecosystem, you're inherently selling long-term value, right, to your clients. Yet so many client procurement departments are still fundamentally wired to buy advertising on FTE hourly cards or campaign based retainers and so on and so forth. How do you how do you re-educate the procurement team to buy your model, and have you been able to successfully move clients from, or rather clients towards value based or output based pricing, Bianca?
Yeah, I think it's a sort of a transitional stage right now, especially with like what we start to create. Sometimes the things that the solutions that we found haven't been executed before, and we're looking at it as like what are we selling? So I think generally it's not a product, could be like a subscription based model, or like what are we going to create here? So it's true. I think the system overall didn't catch up with the evolution of the services lately and the added value that the agencies can bring. But I want to mention, like, procurement is not an enemy. It's actually, they are there doing exactly what they're supposed to do. I think it's just the system will need to be a little bit updated to be able to compare the things and catch up with what we're offering today as agencies generally. So yeah, I think what helps a lot in these conversations, and when people are very open and to chat, is actually, instead of like what does it cost to do that, to switch the conversation and frame a little bit differently, like what does this outcome require? So because if we start with the business problem, we know what the outcome should be, and actually the conversation should be what does it require, because it's slightly different than putting a cost associated with the product into like a prescribed menu. It requires a little bit more flexibility and looking at resources, talent, tools slightly differently. And because right now it's just not simple as FT rate cards and everything. It's output based, basically, pricing, I would say. It takes time to educate and bring everybody at the same level, I think. Not even like for us, we're learning as we're doing things. And yeah, I think it's just like we'll see gradually a movement within the industry towards this type, and probably a little bit more pressure of agencies towards the procurement and the clients generally to be a little bit more open and start looking at that slightly differently than just trying to box in certain things in as before.
One of my prior guests on the show,
Yeah.
she also works at a senior level with WPP. We were discussing about client procurement, and she said something really interesting. She said, what we have also started doing is we have also started, after our usual pitch to the client, once we are through, etc., we also do sort of a mini pitch with the procurement team. And what we try to do is give them the same respect that we are giving to, let's say, the marketing team, and we take them through our ideas, so they also understand what we are trying to solve and what we are trying to achieve, rather than just telling them, hey, this is how we work, this is our hourly rate card, blah blah blah. We take them through also, some parts of our pitch, which I thought was very interesting. You make the procurement team also part of your process, and rather part of your extended team, similar to what you were saying, that, of course, procurement is not the enemy, but sometimes you need to just update their way of thinking also, and how they see things. So yeah, uh,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it's actually the way, right? Procurement is not like an independent floating agency, an observer of the process that comes and puts like a dollar sign on it. It's part of the team, actually. And in order to make your value being understood and appreciated at its real value, like the value that you bring to the business, and have like a material number next to it, I think people need to understand what you're bringing, and they need to understand the value that you're bringing to be able to actually associate it with a number.
right. So Bianca, you're managing, relationship relationships rather, I guess, across studios and time zone and disciplines, and maybe even multiple budget owners. Can you talk about what does the delivery model actually look like? Because when a global client, let's say Coca-Cola, needs something built by a, what's the actual sequence of events that happen, and how is it different from how that same client would brief some other agency or a holding network? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think the beauty of it, and like I'm excited. It's actually something that keeps me going every day, because every brief received puts me in contact with the talented people of AKQA and generally the talented people of WPP. And that's very exciting because I discovered every day new things that we can do, or like new ways of thinking that are I didn't know the day before, and that's like, oh my god, like it's going to be so good. And generally the way we approach the briefs are based not on geographies or anything, is based on capabilities. So when we look at the brief, it doesn't matter where the people are sitting. It's more like bringing the best talent required to solve the brief into the mix. So we end up creating mixed themes of like not only geographies but capabilities. And again, I go back into OpenX model, which is state of the art combination of everything that WPP has great in offering. Um, Servicing Coca-Cola requires absolutely all the marketing capabilities that WPP has, and we come together as one, as OpenX in those contexts. So it's a matter of actually providing the best response for the brief without considering agencies, geographies, even P&Ls, I would say, and without the friction. And I want to highlight, sometimes there is friction, but the idea is that the client shouldn't feel that. It's up to us to make it work in the best way possible, so the internal clockwork mechanism functions in the smoothest way.
But isn't what you're saying and explaining just idealistic? I mean, how do you make it more practical? I mean, what you said, absolutely bang on. We all want to do that. We all want to aspire for it. But
It's happening. It's happening for a few years at WPP with OpenX for Coke. Like I function in this system. Was it perfect of day one? No. And it's constantly improving, and we improve, and we constantly recreate the operating model, adapting it to also the client structure and requirements, and based on the performance, obviously. So it's not like a one standard operating model that fits everybody. It's created around the client business, and it evolves even from one year to another. We're changing the ways we're operating. I know it might sound idealistic, but to be honest, for me, this is present, even past, I would say. Like I'm working like this for some time. And again, I keep saying I'm privileged, maybe because I got a sense, and maybe I'm just living in a bubble, because that's how, I don't know if I'm working for some time as well. But um, yeah, that's something that is part of the present in WPB.
so as a global client lead, how do you dismantle these internal silos that usually agencies or different offices might have, so the client actually gets a seamless experience, Bianca?
I guess is creating the culture around the client, and not like keeping things disconnected on silos, and having those forms of working where creative passes on to social, then passes on to production, and it's everybody coming together from day one in terms of capabilities, everybody contributing equally. Collaboration and communications are key. And the more we can create a sort of a of like, again, vibe culture ultimately around the client, but mostly around the work, the more people get excited, and the more you want to belong, and you feel proud of belonging into that. And there are ways, I've seen that, from smaller briefs to bigger briefs, that keep us excited, because why do we wake up in the morning and come to work? It's the work and the people you're surrounded with, and As long as that you're in a good sync with them and do great work that you're proud of, I think that builds exactly the culture around the client rather than around the studios, countries, or as I was saying before, capabilities or geographies.
Yeah.
It's not easy. I think it's a lot of work and and a lot of it's just leaving behind also what agencies trying to have, because ultimately we are also pitching, right? When you are called on a pitch, what sometimes makes the difference is also your culture, the way you represent. There's an AKQA way of working and style and general vibe versus, let's say, another agency from Publicis and so on. Yeah, that makes the difference. But when you build around a culture around the client, all these differences are kind of like let go. And what is most important is the brand that you're working for and the work that you are executing.
All these other places you've been at, Bianca, right? And now you're at AKQA, WPP, OpenX. Tell me, how do you think, what's the difference in the way you guys pitch to a client versus, other places? I want to know that. How do you approach that differently? What's the pitch theater like? Yeah, talk to us a bit more about that.
Well, I think it's pretty different from one brief to another. And honestly, I mean, in an ideal world, you're trying to pitch less and be, invited directly to work with the clients based on the work you're known for. However, I think there's many ways to skin a cat, and I cannot compare one pitch to another because every single time when we look at the brief and then we investigate, we always find out some other things behind the actual ask. And maybe that's what differentiates AKQA, because we figure out together, like by asking the right questions, what is actually the business that the problem that we need to sort out. And I know sometimes the clients are requesting a campaign, a certain thing, and the question is like, why? Why do you think that responds to that? And what do you like? And by asking, like, in the most naive and probably childish way, like why, so many whys, you end up identify the crux of the issue and probably sometimes articulating together with them what is actually the thing that needs to be addressed instead of the original request. And yeah, I think we are slightly moving also from answering with slides to a more and more material aspect of our business. The more we can answer requests with MVPs or demos, or I think even sizzle videos are a little bit obsolete by now, the better it is, because at the end of the day, just like clients being able to experience what you're thinking is the best proof of, like, any type of proof of concept ends up being a more exciting way of winning a pitch and convincing people of your ideas rather than just, slides level. And I see an evolution into that, even if sometimes it requires a little bit more time invested and a little bit more focus on that. In that becomes the theater, actually. The product demo, sometimes, download it as a not even a beta version, like an MVP for the clients to play with it. You can see the real excitement in a room. So what we used to call a theater and decorate a room, pitch and think about that, it becomes more like a small embedded thing and like a demonstration of your capabilities in the purest possible way with technical support.
And there's a certain type of client, I guess, who would choose AKQA over a traditional agency, right? Again, in your experience, what kind of client is it? Like, what's their internal culture like? What's their digital maturity? And what kind of clients, should never walk through the doors of AKQA?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, I think we do answer to a certain type of of client actually. Like I feel like they, first of all, I think they are the most courageous ones who are comfortable with building things that haven't done before, things that don't exist yet, and are okay with this ambiguity of not, having yet the final answer while we build together the and articulate the way to the solution. There's the courageous ones who are also the decision makers, I would say, where they have actual authority and they are able to, you know, get decisions quickly made, and not many layers of approvals and everything. I think ultimately, and probably the most important, is actually people who believe that the experience is the brand, is not just an expression of it. So we're not, they understand if your app is broken, there's no campaign that would fix that. So you actually need to think about the experience you're creating around your product and brand, rather than actually trying to sugarcoat that. So yeah, if your product onboarding is painful, for example, there's no way to go over it. So yeah, the experience is primary, I think, and we are answering and we are working in a good sync with the clients who understand that.
And one other trend that I'm seeing personally, Bianca, is a lot of clients are in-housing also, right? A lot of work, whether that's creative work or product design or you know uh, engineering, UX, whatever you may have. Now, when a client already has an internal, let's say, a product studio, what's the unique premium that AKQA brings to the table?
I love working with those teams because actually I feel like they're like almost like a support of our business. I think they fast track usually. And when we have them, the in-house studios or in-house agencies next to us, I feels like we have a even like a double superpower. The thing that I think we bring on board, they understand their business better. Like it takes us a while to get there, and so that's why like it's a great way to rely on those teams. However, I think them being too close to the business and so connected to it, like their career depends on that. Like they might not be able to see actually transparently everything that's happening, and actually even take the sometimes, right? Because, usually like the organization being so connected and decisions are, transformational decisions are have a little bit of a resistance with people working there is going to be hard today. We come with this like outsider view that allows us to actually have an objective point of view, which could be considered or not, obviously, but and we come with no politics in the system. So I think that helps a lot actually for a clear view of what we need to sort out together.
Ye- Yeah, and I mean, if you look at AKQA again from the outside, I'm looking at somebody who's part advertising firm, part management consulting, because we've been talking so much about solving business problems, and also, of course, product design. Something that you guys are very well known for. I guess this question has been around for a while, but I'm keen to know your point of view on this, which is on consultancies getting into the business. You see Accenture Song buying creative agencies, and of course Draga is part of Accenture now, right? You see Deloitte pitching brand strategy. You see McKinsey having a design practice now. From inside AKQA, how do you look at this landscape? Do you think this threat is real, or do you think these consulting firms will not be able to do what we as advertising inherently creative agencies have been able to do for a long time?
We come across this quite often, and we overlap in in the industry, like in pitches and in different aspects, as you mentioned. What I think is buying a creative agency doesn't necessarily transfer the culture of the creative agency. So that's one thing. Like, you cannot run a creative agency as a consulting practice. So that flow that I was discussing before, the way we're looking at things from, from the data and analyst up to the executional craft part is quite unique. And we have these multi-talented people that are able to see through the steps and be multi-hyphenate, I would say, and able to see the final products, which I still find as an outsider could be complicated in a consulting versus ad agency, but I cannot speak necessarily to that. I think there's a clear thread. There are very smart people out there competing with us, and at least in certain parts of business, they are definitely winning. I think where we have an advantage is that we can make that transformation real, like make it happen and demonstrate it immediately, as I was mentioning to you before. Like, let's do an MVP, let's create a demo, let's do an interface for the clients to see that. That's where I feel like we are a little bit in advantage from them. But otherwise, the competition is there, and they exist, and we overlap in many businesses, and sometimes they take a part of the end-to-end experience and we take another part.
Right. Historically, Bianca, AKQA has charged, one would say, a premium for digital craftsmanship in the industry, right? Great people, great products, great design. But if you look at the landscape now, you see Gen AI doing a lot of heavy lifting in terms of designing, in terms of execution, in terms of prototyping. And all of that is, of course, giving capabilities to client teams as well, right? I'm wondering how does AKQA defend its territory in this scenario, especially the if the building part, the execution part becomes sort of commoditized.
Mhm.
What does AKQA pivot to owning, and how do
Mm.
you defend your territory?
I think there's a little bit of a difference where, because we are not pivoting, we're embracing it. Like, we are the ones that proposing these technological changes and embracing them and supporting them and creating agentic flows that actually multiply our superpowers generally. So I don't think we need to pivot. I I want to still comment on something like, if technology will accelerate the process and will make things faster, and there will be agentic ways that some will replace parts of the process. However, I think the human judgment and the imagination are remaining the differentiators. So for us, that's where I think the value stays and will stay for a while.
All right. My next question is on your journey and on your experience, Bianca. You've been with all sorts of different agencies, right? You've been with a traditional agency at the more of a start of your career. You've been at, of course, holdcos. You're at a holdco right now, but you're managing a different type of an agency, if I may say that, at AKQA. I want to talk about how what kind of learnings you've had in your journey to define what good work is, what's good craft, and not just effectiveness, but what exactly is good work as far as your learnings and your different
Mm.
places that you've worked at is concerned.
Yeah, well, when I joined, what's funny? Back when I was back in Romania, and I think I was on the client side at that time, working for Vodafone, um, and I got my hands on the book that I just wrote together with one of our clients from Nike at that time. And while reading the book, I was thinking, like, I wish I would know this agency, and I wish I would work with this agency one day, like AKQA. Little did I know that probably like a decade and a half later, I'd be joining actually and working closely even with Ajaz. I ended up telling him that it was all about velocity at that point. I was like, I found it so exciting. I thought that's such, progressive way of thinking and doing things, and it was at that time. So I was always a super fan. And when I joined, besides the all the progressive ways of thinking of AKQA, that I'm constantly humbled by how smart the people around me are. And that's part of the good work. I'm landing there. I thought AKQA has an amazing craft as well, which I haven't seen yet, or haven't met yet before in my whole career, but also it's sometimes different, like especially in the competitive landscape to compete with. And that's again on the territory of technology, the craft, it's still 100% human, to be honest. Like there's something that I don't find threatening when we come about the AKQ's craft. Good work for me, it's actually the type of work that moves the people, that ends up creating new habits, that ends up, just being talked about, that influences actually and creates a sort of a legacy. So I don't know if the definition of the good work has changed for me in during my over 25 years of doing this, but what it changes, the bar is it constantly has been raised. And with AKQA, I feel like I found my tribe for a while, and I haven't been as proud as I am on a daily basis of my colleagues as I am right now. And honestly, I feel like I'm for years in a sort of a honeymoon with AKQA, because I'm telling you, I'm talking to people, I'm like, oh my God, you are so smart. And sometimes we have issues that I'm for a second stressing out, and then I realize like, no, all I need is a meeting with
Well,
a few of these people.
you were talking about a book, so this is a perfect segue our to our last question. Do you have any podcast or book recommendations, Bianca?
Yeah, I'm not really like a super podcast, fan, generally, but yeah, I follow a few. I think one of the ones that I follow, it's Ezra Klein's show, basically, because it addresses the complex businesses, and I think it's a good connection with what happens today and how it can be simplified and approached. Hard fork is another one that I'm looking at once in a while for the AI part and how it speaks about the technological advancements. Occasionally, I listen to Mel Robbins because I feel like she's amazing, and I don't know, she somehow masters the behavioral science and makes it applicable in our everyday, you know, ways of living. And yeah, my sweet spot, I think, is a part of the for storytelling culture. I follow the Prestige TV, are the podcasts about, they are talking a little bit about the TV shows that are in the zeitgeist, like, and they start, deconstructing them, and it's quite exciting to hear that and what was behind the thinking. And
It's good. That's good to know. And I think this is the right time to thank you again for this wonderful chat, Bianca. I really enjoyed myself. Really learned so much from you and from your experiences. So thank you so much for taking out the time.
of course, yeah, thank you, Vishal, for having me here and for all these interesting questions. I loved chatting with you. Anytime you need me, just give me a call.
And that is a wrap on episode 31 of the Indian AdGeek. Next Monday, episode 75 of the Indian AvGeek will feature Kareem Maklouf, the CCO of Royal Jordanian Airlines. For everyone listening, if this episode made you rethink what an agency can be or what a client partner should be, share it with one person in your network who you think is still asking the old questions because the new ones are far more interesting. You'll find the Indian AdGeek on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your pods. If you haven't subscribed, now's a good time. I'm active on social everywhere. Hit me up with your feedback at Vishal Mehra. Until next time, keep your creative antennas tuned and your ad geek flag flying high. Stay quirky, stay curious, and keep geeking out.